Andrea Arnold is an immensely talented storyteller. Her worlds are chaotic and contemplative, careening wildly from the exhausting highs and lows of desperation and heartbreak. Her style is reminiscent of the kitchen sink realism that characterized British independent cinema during the 1950s and 60s. This style often focused on working-class characters in naturalistic settings, with subjects ranging from interracial relationships to abortion to crime. The end goal of all these styles was to do away with the constraints of traditional filmmaking and uphold a grittier realism above flashier entertainment. Arnold is considered by many to be one of the modern purveyors of kitchen sink realism, or more appropriately, neo-kitchen sink realism. Her method is intuitive, blending illusion with reality, combining professional actors and non-actors, writing a story but also encouraging plot development through improvisation, foregoing the use of sets and shooting entirely on location, which can mean on the grounds of an East London estate, as was the case for her 2009 film Fish Tank, or on the road in the claustrophobic vans and motel rooms that turn up in American Honey. All of her films share a quality of grit and vulnerability. Arnold has a penchant for getting excellent performances out of actors, both professional and amateur. She encourages them to use what they know and to just be. It creates the natural atmosphere that's come to characterize her films. She also knows how to take advantage of a location, finding the charisma of each setting. Bird explodes with the rambunctious voices that color particular parts of South England. American Honey captures the peculiarities and stark disparities within Americana. In her adaptation of the Emily Bronte novel Wuthering Heights, Arnold cleverly uses the wild landscape to put us in Catherine's state of mind. In all of her films, location is essentially another character, perhaps the most important one. These grounded explorations of self weigh austerity in equal measure with rhapsodic release, and they're entrancing. I say all of this to make it plain that Andrea Arnold is a brilliant filmmaker, and I'm moved by a lot of her work. There's one thing about her films, though, particularly American Honey and a little with Bird, that, to put it simply, make me go, huh. American Honey follows Star, played by the lovely Sasha Lane. Star is an 18-year-old girl who is trapped in an abusive home where she's forced to spend her days caring for children that aren't hers. She longs for freedom and for control over her own life. After a chance encounter with a group of outsiders led by the charismatic Jake, Star is offered a job and a shot to join them. They're a mag crew, traveling around state to state selling subscription magazines. It's far from a glamorous job and it doesn't pay well, but for Star, the emancipation it offers is worth more than monetary gain. It's not surprising that most of the other people in this ragtag crew are as young as Star, if not younger, runaways with no other place to go. In fact, when Star is hired by Crystal, the real leader of the mag crew, she is hired on one condition.
You got anybody who's gonna miss you? Not really. Okay, good. You're hired.
For Star, the job is basically a dream come true, at least for a little while. She gets the freedom she never had in Oklahoma. She gets to be around people her own age. She gets to explore her sexuality on her terms. But of course, things aren't as good as she initially believes them to be, or hopes for them to be. She starts a relationship with Jake, feeling that they have a special connection. Despite the ambiguity of Jake's relationship with Crystal, Jake turns out to be controlling, manipulative, and Star finds out that he basically does the same thing he did with her to every new girl that gets hired.
You know, I pay Jake girl money, $100 every time he finds a girl. And he fucks all of them too. Y'all don't mean nothing to him.
Star ends up feeling just as isolated as she did in Oklahoma, and the film ends with her submerging into a body of water, just when it looks like she's going to stay under. She breaks the surface and inhales sharply. Road trip movies centering on women of the dramatic variety tend to culminate with a bleak conclusion. Thelma and Louise find freedom, revenge, and power, but ultimately pay the price with their lives. Agnes Varda's Vagabond begins with the main character freezing to death, and the film goes on to trace us back to where she started. And Kelly Reichardt's Wendy and Lucy, Wendy's beloved dog is taken away from her and rehomed, and it guts me every single time. While watching the end of American Honey, the mind goes to those dark places. She won't come up, you think. This is how she dies. This is how she regains control. But Star resurfaces and you realize you weren't witnessing the end, but an end. A baptism, an entryway into a new life. Star is on a search for self in a world that is increasingly hostile, unsteady, and unpredictable. When the film ends, all you really want is for her to find a real love and a sense of belonging. Not necessarily romantic love either, rather a real love for community, for herself, and for her identity. But then you wonder, Does Star's identity really matter in the grand scheme of American Honey? It should, but it often feels like it doesn't. After American Honey was released, Black audience members and film critics had the same problem with it. For a film centering on a half-Black girl, the movie's exploration of Star's intersectionality within the American South was remarkably shallow and, frankly, unexplored. Other reviews and analyses all describe rites of passage and the disparate future for American youths, two things that are undeniably at the heart of Arnold's film. Many of these discussions of American Honey are able to describe the film's position on a class within the American South, but very few of them even acknowledge where the film sits in its examination, or lack thereof, of race within the American South. I spend a lot of time thinking about hair, Black hair in particular. I think about how my hair, what I do with it, is politicized even if I don't want it to be. Likewise, American Honey, even if it doesn't do much to unpack how Star's race is tied to her treatment, can't be read without it. The movie is open in its depiction of class disparity. Shortly after Star joins the MAD crew, she shadows Jake and they go from house to house with a sales pitch. The first house they go to, Star is immediately pissed off. She takes one look at the big house, at the 12-year-old girl whose birthday party ended in a monstrous pile of presents, and the condescension of the homeowner, and she's just angry. The movie starts with Star dumpster diving for expired food, and now she's confronted with the excess and wastefulness of an upper class she will never reach, no matter how much she hustles. We see this dichotomy presented a number of times, and it's always harrowing. The MAD crew's existence and their futile chase to realize the American dream is also inherently political. The irony of their constant traveling and hustling is that they're going nowhere fast, ending up in the same place time and time again. Throughout the movie, the crew will play the same songs. Sometimes they sing along passionately, and other times they stare quietly out of the window, listless. This repetition creates an image of monotony. Theirs is a rat race with no destination. You can't have a film that highlights class disparity in America, specifically in the South, a film that makes a motif out of Confederate flags, and a film that sees a half-Black protagonist going from one predominantly white space to another, without racial commentary, even if the story is intended to exist within a post-racial context. Am I asking for people in the movie to constantly point at Star and scream, "Ah, a mixed race," or "a Black"? No, I'm not. That would be stupid. But watching the story unfold, seeing how Star is often the only Black person in any given scene, makes you wonder how much richer the story would be if it tied Star's racial experiences into the narrative of her isolation and yearning a bit more clearly. There are so many instances in American Honey that give a nudge toward a richer story if Star's identity was acknowledged even momentarily. For example, halfway into the film, Jake shows Star his secret stash of stolen jewels, treasures he wants to use to fulfill his dream of leaving the MAD crew and buying a home of his own. He describes the simple life he aches for, how he doesn't need much to be happy, just a bit of land and a modest home. But he drops this in there for some reason.
I just want to get like my own spot somewhere in the woods and just stay small, you know, like a little duplex or something. Like the 40 acres and a mule, you know?
When I first saw this, I did a double take. Jake could have said anything, used any analogy, but he said 40 acres and a mule to his half-Black love interest in a movie that refuses to illuminate Star's experience being the only person of color in every room she walks into. Leaving it so unexplored only amplifies the silence. At one point, one of the girls in the MAD crew teases Star by rubbing her head, fingers caressing Star's glorious locks. When you watch this as a person whose hair isn't so politicized, this scene means nothing. But when you watch it as a Black person, and you see a white girl reaching out to caress Star's locks, your mouth falls open and you wait for the scene to acknowledge the wild thing that just happened. When it doesn't, you feel cheated. It just happens. And it feels like Star's identity is wholly irrelevant. In one scene, the crew is sitting on a curb while waiting for the ride back to the motel after a long day of selling in the sweltering heat. They bemoan the weather, douse themselves in cold water, and one character looks at Star and says,
I would not want to have dreads right now.
This is a white.
There's been little difference between her isolation in Oklahoma, being the only Black person in her home, and her isolation on the road, being the only Black person in the back of a van with a bunch of white kids who say nigga to her face without blinking.
So this nigga right here.
Loving this nigga.
And that may just be the biggest reason American Honey's ambivalence towards Star as a biracial Black woman is so puzzling. Because, well, the motherfucking N-word. It would be an exaggeration to say the word is uttered constantly in the film, but for a movie with one half-Black person in the cast, It's too damn much. The word is said frequently, but never by Star, always by her white peers in the Mad Crew. With this being such a recurrence, we're left to focus, perhaps unequally, on what isn't being said. As someone who grew up and has mostly lived in the South, I know all too well how common it is to run into white people who can fetishize blackness, exoticize it, and despise it all at the same time. We see this trifecta of conflicting ideas toward blackness most blatantly with Star's father, Nathan. It's never explicitly explained what Star's family situation is, but there are enough clues to help us parse out an almost complete picture. A few viewers have mistakenly identified Star's mother as being the woman she asked to keep Ruben and Kelsey, the two children we see her taking care of in the beginning, but Star states that her biological mother died from a meth overdose 3 years earlier, when Star would have been 15, and that after her death she was sent to live in Oklahoma. At the beginning of the movie, Nathan tells her,
I've got things to do.
Come and dance with Dad.
Nathan proudly displays a Confederate flag in his home. This, with the fact that he was in a kind of relationship with Star's mother, an unseen black woman, gives us more insight into the kind of environment Star came of age in. One where her blackness made her a constant outsider in her own neighborhoods and even in her own family. We can presume that Star, having been raised by her mother for a time at least, didn't always feel as isolated as she does when we meet her, but once her mother dies, she's completely cut off from her black side of the family and is sent to live in a place where she is frequently the only black person around, not to mention the only person with a natural hairstyle like locks. We can also guess that Star, having grown up in such environments, has a strangely intimate relationship with how white people try on different forms of blackness, weaving in and out of the things they like and the things they don't. In a well-known scene including Crystal, who seems to have it out for Star, Crystal gives Star a dressing down while wearing a Confederate flag bikini. All the while she gets Jake to apply a self-tanner on her body. On display here is the cognitive dissonance it takes to wear a symbol of hatred against black Americans while wanting to be browner than you actually are. Writer and comedian Jordan Searles penned a review for American Honey back in 2016 for Fishnet Cinema. In it, she doesn't just ask whether Star's race was considered within the context of the story. She also highlights important questions and themes that could have been investigated in regards to the isolation Star feels and her positioning as a pariah in her own family. It has all the fixings of a diverse story: flavor, hip-hop aesthetic, elite of color, without addressing any of the concepts that make it diverse. How is it that Star's Confederate flag-loving daddy hooked up with a black woman to create Star? What was that parental experience like for Star? How did she feel about her race? Was she alienated in a community full of rednecks as a half-black woman, or did she pass? Is she okay with all the white people around her saying nigga because that's what she's used to back home? These are the questions that plague me whenever I revisit American Honey. Most of the members of the Mad Crew are people who style themselves after hip-hop culture. They love hip-hop so much they don't hesitate to rap along to the N-word even after someone like Star joins the crew. To them, she may be black, but she's not black like that. Or maybe they don't even notice. We don't know to what extent, if at all, Star is bothered by them using the word. We only know what we see, which is that Star never says it, not once. Given her background, her experience with the word goes beyond hearing it in rap songs. It wouldn't be far-fetched to guess that she's been called that a couple of times, maybe even by her own racist father. The word probably isn't fun to her, and it's not one she feels comfortable throwing around, especially around other white people, even if they think it's okay. There's also the possibility that given her biracial identity and light skin, she may not even feel black enough to say the word at all, which contrasts greatly against the ease with which her white peers say it without hesitation. Going back to Star's familial ties, we can see how the family dynamic and the way she's treated within it betrays an inherent racism. Ruben and Kelsey are Star's half-siblings, the three of them sharing Nathan as a frankly shitty father. When the movie starts, we're presented with family photographs featuring the kids and their biological mother. Star shows up in none of these photos. The fact that Nathan is abusing his daughter and the contempt Misty appears to have for Star makes me wonder if Misty felt envious of Star, and instead of seeing Nathan as a predator, she saw Star as a promiscuous pursuer. Star is treated as a sexual object and an indentured servant who takes the sole responsibility for the children, as if the price she has to pay for staying there is giving away her body and her labor. Nathan believes he's entitled to her body. Misty believes she's entitled to Star's reluctant nannying of her children, so much so that when Star asks her to take her own kids, she's told no.
She wants us to have the kids because she's got a fucking job in Kansas? They are yours. Fuck you, bitch.
Star has to trick Misty in order to get away. The absence of photographs of Star in the family's home, even 3 years after her arrival, ensures that she's never seen as a member of the family. She is effectively a nanny who should be grateful she even has a place to stay. The romance, if you can call it that, at the heart of the story is between Star and top salesman of the Mag Crew, Jake. And the relationship is already skeevy on account of Jake's manipulative tactics in the many years he has over Star, but it takes on another level of perversion when you see the similarities in how Jake and Nathan perceive Star. Jake appears to be completely different from Nathan, and he represents a freedom that Star is hungry for. After all she's been through, she wants Jake to be the fairy tale ending to her story. The man who takes her away from a stifled life of abuse and shows her the world. For a while, Star can view it that way. But Jake is a chameleon who becomes what people need for him to be, so he can get what he wants out of them. He says it himself when he shows Star the ropes on her first day as a salesman on the crew.
Basically, as soon as they open that door and look at you, that's the critical moment. That's the make or break moment, because in that second, you gotta work them, you gotta read them, you gotta be able to scan them and figure them out, figure out what kind of person that person wants in their life. Then you gotta be that person.
When the two of them meet, Jake is immediately able to tell what Star wants from him, and in playing into it, is able to get what he wants from her body and her lever. Their relationship is abundant with highs and lows, swinging between spiteful fighting and ebullient flirtation. Jake is inconsistent, unpredictable, and constantly leaves Star in the lurch of uncertainty. One moment he tells her that he cares for her and is having sex with her. The next he's letting go of her hand and telling her there are no relationships in the Mag Crew. At one point, shortly after Star makes her first sale, Jake tells her to give him the money she made so he can give it to Crystal. He also insists that they made the sale together when she had done so herself.
We did the sales.
No, I did the
Can
same.
we not argue? Can you just give it to me? Do you want to be in a Mag Crew? You gotta listen to me. Just give it to me.
The way Jake hides whatever is blooming between himself and Star is not unlike the way Star has been hidden in her own family. The Confederate flags could very well be a way to tie into Star's identity and tell us what kind of environment she was raised in, but it could also be just a misplaced sentimentality for Southern culture, up to and including this symbol of hatred. The title of the movie comes from a song by the band Lady Antebellum. Lady A, group that came under fire for having a name that romanticized the antebellum South, which was largely characterized by prevalent slavery. They went on to change their name to Lady A, and in the process, bulldozed over a black jazz singer who had been performing as Lady A for decades. Some argue that the name change was unnecessary, since antebellum literally translates to before war. But when the band announced the name change, they spoke about how they were inspired to call themselves that after their first photo shoot at an antebellum-style home, which may or may not have been a plantation. When we set out together almost 14 years ago, we named our band after the Southern antebellum-style home where we took our first photos. As musicians, it reminded us of all the music born in the South that influenced us: Southern rock, blues, R&B, gospel, and of course, country. In 2011, Tammy Winfrey Harris wrote about Lady Antebellum and the casual glorification of this dark period in American history. Over the years, at least 2 women have gushed at me. I would just love to go back to that time. One, a white woman who had recently read the Margaret Mitchell novel that became the classic movie, did not consider that for her to be Scarlet, I would have to be a darky working in the fields. My family would have to live in bondage as chattel, our very lives dependent on the whims of our masters. The way of life she associated with the antebellum period and the economy that supported it was dependent on free labor and the dehumanization of people of color, not to mention classism and sexism. As an African-American descendant of slaves, I cannot overlook that bitter reality. My acquaintance read Gone with the Wind and wondered how grand it would be to be Scarlett O'Hara. I wondered how awful it must have been to be Mammy. The glorifying of pre-Civil War South is so prevalent that it's genuinely hard to tell if the scene where Crystal lectures Star while wearing a Confederate bikini speaks more toward her hatred for Star or more toward the love Crystal has for her Southern heritage, how much pleasure she gets from being able to call herself an American honey.
Where's that accent from? Texas. So you a Southern girl, a real American honey like me.
After all, this is a story about America told through the eyes of an English person, and who's to say that there isn't a little bit of romanticization interplaying here? On one hand, I'm inclined to believe that a lot of the things I just observed are all coincidental, things that I and other Black viewers bring to the film because of our backgrounds. On the other hand, Andrea Arnold doesn't strike me as a creator incapable of setting this up intentionally, because she is still, to date, the only film director to create an adaptation of Wuthering Heights that takes into account key descriptions of Heathcliff. My friend Princess Weeks has a delightful video about the idea of tall, dark, and handsome, and another one on how Heathcliff's casting has been oversimplified for decades. Emily Bronte described Heathcliff as dark-skinned, but throughout the many years and endless adaptations of Wuthering Heights, the character has been cast with white actors. It's true that most fairer-skinned people see the description of dark skin, and they don't think brown skin or dark brown skin. They just think darker than them, which seems to translate solely to olive, because brown and darker brown just don't exist in their minds by default. Don't worry, I'm not doing the Rue thing again. Andrea Arnold's vision of the story was refreshing not only in its visceral handheld style that elicited a troubling chaos and muddiness, but it was refreshing because she actually read the description of Heathcliff being dark-skinned and thought, I bet he's not white. In an interview with NPR, she stated, in the book, it was clear he wasn't white-skinned. Heathcliff's difference creates a lot of anger, especially from Kathy's brother Henley, and that's why Heathcliff gets brutalized. There's also this suggestion that he was taken from Liverpool, which had a massive slave trade at the time. It would be easy and probably less troublesome to just inject Black Heathcliff into the story and call it a day. But Arnold doesn't pretend to not know what this means within the historical context of Wuthering Heights. Henley's disdain for Heathcliff is charged with explicit racism. He mainly uses slurs to refer to Heathcliff, and at one point he orders for Heathcliff to be whipped as a means of putting him in his place. In Bronte's novel, Henley's virulent hatred for Heathcliff is mainly framed as jealousy. Henley wishes to be the sole recipient of his father's affections, and Heathcliff's arrival threatens that. But Arnold, in adhering to the descriptions of Heathcliff's swarthy complexion, knew that couldn't be the end of it, and she didn't beat around the bush of his otherness. This vision for Wuthering Heights was shared with the world in 2011, so by the time we get to American Honey, which began filming in the summer of 2015, we know Arnold knows how to read racial context in a story. I don't know if that makes the ambiguity of American Honey better or worse. Star is a biracial girl living in a predominantly white space. In the beginning, this fact seems like an intentional facet of Star's feeling of displacement, restlessness, and exhaustion. Even if it's left unexplored, it's impossible to read the film without considering how Star both sticks out and becomes invisible, both at home in her predominantly white town and in the all-white Mad Crew. That feeling of restlessness and not belonging is a through line that becomes more pronounced as the story goes on. At the end of the film, when Star emerges from the water and the music from the crew's bonfire stops, it feels like a breath for a more fulfilling life. Every time I watch the movie, I hope Star goes on to carve out a space for herself in the world, and to find a community where she's not the only person of color, and where she doesn't feel like a constant pariah. In 2024, Arnold's sixth feature film, Bird, was introduced to the world, and it was spellbinding. Bird infuses Arnold's signature hyperrealism with unexpected touches of magical realism that, no pun intended, give the film wings to take flight. Bird is not just unique in its approach to adolescent angst, vigilantism, and found families, but it stands out as the first time one of Arnold's lone Black protagonists isn't so insulated in whiteness. Bailey lives with her father, Bug, and her half-brother, Hunter, in a rundown building filled with other squatters. When she's with her father, she's very much the only brown person around, unless one of his friends, a non-speaking character, is present. But unlike Star, whose Black mother is invisible, nothing more than a backstory, Bailey's mother, Peyton, lives across town with Bailey's younger siblings. Shortly after Bailey meets Bird, a mysterious and warm stranger on a quest to find his parents, Bailey makes a visit to her mother's home to see if she has any answers. When she arrives, her siblings squeal in delight. They're beyond happy to see her, and it's clear that even though she lives with Bug, she tries to visit her other siblings often. She's a wonderful big sister who takes the title seriously, protective and loving on her brief visits back home. As the film goes on, we learn that Bailey originally stayed with her mom before being sent to live with Bug. Both Bug and Peyton suggest that Bailey was out of control.
This is my oldest.
The one you got rid of? You the naughty one, yeah?
Yeah, watch your time.
In Bird, Bailey's sense of displacement is apparent, not just in her otherness while living with her dad, but in that nebulous space between Peyton and Bug. Bailey feels that no home is quite hers.
What did you do to your hair? Cut it.
You're always ashamed of it.
No, I wasn't.
Did Bug make you do it?
No, I did it myself.
At one point, Bug, suspecting Bailey of having spent the night with the boy, a completely baseless assumption, roughs her up and seethes that she's just like her mother.
I'm fucking kidding you, Jeremy. Yeah. Jeremy, no, look at me.
What?
Jeremy.
That's alright.
Yeah, like your ma, like your fucking ma. Yeah, I should have left you with her. Hey.
There's no requirement for other characters to point at Bailey and remind her that she's black. It's enough trying to see her existing in both these spaces and not feeling enough for either one. The difference is in the weight of isolation. In Wuthering Heights, Heathcliffe's isolation as the only person of color in an all-white environment is not only understandable, but it's necessary. A Heathcliff that isn't such an outlier is a well-adjusted Heathcliff, and a well-adjusted Heathcliff is, not Heathcliff. In Bird, Bailey isn't as isolated, and we get to see her engage with other people that look like her, even if it's mainly her family. In American Honey, Star's otherness is a footnote that shouldn't be a footnote, and its minimization is distracting. Cinema grounded in realism often has no patience for the primed or embellished. The ugly parts will remain ugly, and they will be center of the frame, and if it makes you uncomfortable, good. A film like American Honey, one that goes to such lengths to show the poverty-stricken lands devastated by meth, neglect, and the opioid epidemic, should also be one that is capable of standing more firmly in its ideas toward racism, or at least how race may inform or affect a person living in the American South. To her defense, Arnold is a lover of cinematic ambiguity, and she does it well. She never condescends her audience, never assumes they can't put the pieces together for themselves. In her 2016 NPR interview, Arnold said that we over-explain things too much, not just in our films, but in our day-to-day lives.
You know, when I make films, I don't want to be discussing these things because I feel like, one, they're really personal, and two, they're really complicated. And I wouldn't want to try and uncomplicate them for anybody who was about to see the film. So to try and sit here and explain it, for me, would sort of unravel some of the mystery of it. And I think the mystery in films is really important, and that if we try and explain things too much, then you take out the fun of the film. I wouldn't want to explain to them what I kind of intended or what I felt were the intentions of each of those characters. I think that has to unravel in the film, and I leave room for people to put themselves or to work it out or to go and argue in the bar afterwards. We over-explain everything in life, and I'm desperate to leave a little mystery in what I do.
Leaving things unsaid can be powerful, and I have to agree with her. This is true, too, of American Honey. However, in a cinematic landscape where race is either the end-all be-all of a character's existence or an irrelevant moot point that erases a historical context, ambiguity of this kind can be insulting and dangerous. American Honey's ambiguity towards its racial politics don't aid the story, but hinders it by turning a pivotal aspect into an elephant in the room, like an open secret not to be acknowledged.